confidence, would you tell this particular employee, would you breach your fiduciary duty to the organization to help out a friend in this situation?
Indirectly.
Indirectly? How would you manage that?
Tell them that I can't say, but everything is possible.
Right.
So they get the hint that they may be included in this.
Right.
And the family is in a situation where they are post-Catholic and using their stuff tools. So with all of us try to find a way outside.
Right.
Getting from a message in the
Right. Well, I think that this provides sort of a useful framework for this, is that, you know, in telling them, I probably haven't broken any laws, right? And if this is someone, you know, that I'm close to, that has served me well in the past, I probably have some motivation personally, you know, to maintain this relationship. So it comes down to the difference between right, you know, and wrong. And so, you know, I think that this is kind of a difficult scenario to say one thing is right or wrong. But I like your response is that you can probably indirectly say, well, yeah, this may not be the best time in the world to be buying a new house. This is a difficult situation, right? But we are, you know, we've been entrusted with information, and you know, the organization comes to know that you breached that trust, then you're, you know, potentially putting yourself at risk. Okay. So, where are we at? 12:30. Do we want to break now for lunch for an hour, or carry on for another half an hour? Get us to 1 o'clock? Okay.
والله لا نطلع الباب يطلع ما صح أنا خوفك
Okay, I think actually we can breeze through this chapter. We have already covered most of, well, certainly these three concepts at the beginning. We have some objections here that I think we talked about. Here's a situation that I think is maybe useful to have a look at, because these are the sorts of decisions I think you'll be faced with in your own careers. So, we have, I guess we assume that this is a public company because we have shareholders. And we have some various options here that we have had an exceptionally good year. And so should we dividend these earnings? Should we spend to benefit employees, either on a gym, a daycare? Should we spend this on marketing or on drug research? So from a utilitarian perspective, which of these would give us the greatest good, the greatest number, with the least harm? Which of these five options? The final one?
Or spend on-
Yeah, that's our business, right? And so, sorry?
Marketing as well. Spend on marketing. Market the product.
Right, well,
Maybe to
I
spend
think we
on
would
drug-
argue that marketing probably is ultimately just going to benefit shareholders, well, probably employees a bit too, but
Maybe
if we
spend
make a
on drug
major,
research, yeah.
if we make a major breakthrough in our drug research, we have the potential to help society as a general. So, is that the case? If we're drug co, should we only really be focused on research?
No, really, not almost.
So what other sort of considerations do we have? What other perspectives should we potentially consider in making decisions like this?
Maybe
Well,
take it
that's,
out
yeah,
to the
absolutely.
shareholder.
We can have the greatest products in the world, but obviously if consumers are not aware of them, then that's sort of defeating the purposes as well. So, yeah, I think what we're trying to point out here is that we can't really use just one perspective, because it would be quite convenient, right, for most of the decisions to say, well, you know, how do we get the most leverage out of this? How can we allocate these resources to get the maximum return on them, you know, from the greatest number? And if we do that, it would point to one thing, but it neglects the other parts of our business. We could find that, you know, we're suffering a great deal of attrition because of the demographic that we've hired. They all have children. We have no facilities for them, and so they're leaving our organization, right? So if that was the case, then this is probably going to be a more immediate need than these others. So, you know, these are fairly sort of practical situations, situations that we will face in our own careers. And the point here is that there isn't really any easy solution to really need to look at multiple perspectives. All right. I think we've covered most of this. There was another point here. So, I think we actually went across most of this as well. We talked about bribes and how they can solve sort of some immediate problems, but ultimately lead to some larger issues down the line. This sort of repeats what we've gone through here in the past. So let's try and get through one more chapter here. Okay, I think there's a couple of useful points in this chapter. Talks about discrimination in the workplace, and when we think it's appropriate to use affirmative action in order to try and remedy our situation, not just from a current sort of context, but perhaps remedying some of the injustices from the past. Sorry? Chapter 4? All of those issues actually were covered in the first 3 chapters. So it sort of it goes over kind of the same sort of basic concepts, just in a little different sort of slant to kind of try and reinforce them. Yeah. But you'll see basically the same principles from the first 3 reiterated in it. So I think that that we all have prejudice. We might want to think that we're fair-minded and that we don't really see people, as from a different race, a different gender. But it's not really true. We all have biases, and it's based on our experience. And we do try, maybe not to, but I think we're all guilty of stereotypes. If we have one bad experience with one person from, a specific group, and we end up labeling that group. And so this particular chapter talks about where organizations run into trouble with the discrimination and some remedies that are useful in getting around it. So we do see this in organizations where, in the UAE, you will see ads looking for particular races of individuals. Is that, or gender, is that only females apply, or only locals apply, only Arabs apply. In the West, certainly in Canada, the US, and Europe, you know, those are all illegal practices that you can't really discriminate on it with those bases. And even now, I see in the US, because this has been an issue, is that they're forcing universities to come up with new means for identifying applicants. It's that it will be very soon that you won't be putting your name on any university application. You will only be referenced by a number because there has been discrimination against people, well, based on race, right? They associate their name with their race, and there has been systematic discrimination, which I hope we can all agree is wrong, that it doesn't really matter where the person comes from, is that I don't think any of us fit a stereotype, right? Is that, especially negative stereotypes, right? In every society, you're going to find some people that are less moral, less ethical, but you know, we shouldn't be cast by the poor judgments of others. So, discrimination is it's basically when people get ahead, when it's not based on merit. And in the past, there has been a system of seniority that said, well, the longer that a person's been with the organization, the more right they should have to advance. And that, too, I think, is being phased out. That, and I don't know, what do you think? Should a person be judged? Should their advancement through an organization, should it be based on their contribution, their merits, their abilities, or how long they've been with the organization?
Your experience, their contribution, this is how you differentiate. Yeah, it's based on the
I mean, I suppose there should be maybe some reward for loyalty, right?
Absolutely, as well, yes, there should be.
But
For people who've been serving the company for long enough. But at the
But
same
without
time,
merit, it's not justifiable. Even if they're seniors and they don't have the ability or skills or whatever, they haven't been serving as they could.
Right.
It's not justifiable.
so, yeah,
But
it's
the amount of years that they've been serving the
Right.
company for, being loyal to the company.
that I think we can all probably agree that it should be based on my contribution, right? I value the amount of work that I put into this organization more so than,
Because an employee wouldn't be in the company if they weren't contributing to the company.
well, yeah, I think that that's certainly the case in private industry, but I think government operates on a little different sort of basis. It's that we do in most public institutions, we see situations where seniority can play a bigger part in one's future career over merit or ability. Yeah, discrimination occurs when we've made some moral judgment, which that part can be fine, but where we run into trouble is where we have a harmful or negative effect as a result. And hopefully we all know what racism is. So I guess there are kind of 4 different situations that we come across here, that either the incident is isolated or it's part of the institution, and then it's either unintentional or intentional. And so what we're mostly concerned about is that this is institution, right? If it's isolated, well, then hopefully we can deal with those situations, on a case-by-case basis. But if it's part of our system, part of our institution, then I think it's a bigger problem for us. So, here's a situation where we have a knowing discrimination, and it's basically based on ignorance, right? In this case here, we have 2 employees, but we don't think that they're going to like it, right? So this is basically unintentional, something that's resolvable, but we're not so concerned about isolated cases as we are that is institutional. So here we have an example. Not a Star Trek expert, but I always thought Klingons were hard workers. But here we have a situation where they're being discriminated against because of a personal belief that they're not, that they're lazy. So this is isolated, but obviously intentional discrimination. Here we have a case where we don't have a case here. We have, where a college only recruits a specific type of student. So, well, this may not be intentional. It is institutional because of the places that they recruit from. So this is sort of a geographical bias that ends up in being discrimination in the organization. And here we have sort of both sides. We have institutional and intentional, where we have a particular age limit based on who gets promoted and who doesn't. All right. So here we have 4 different scenarios. The first one is that we don't hire women for the managerial program because, in our experience, as soon as they get married, then they quit, go and have a family. So is that intentional or unintentional? So that would be intentional. And then is this isolated or is this institutional?
Institutional.
Yeah, it looks like this is a policy of the organization. So obviously, this is sort of the worst case scenario, right? Where we're undertaking discrimination on a systematic basis, and it's part of our intention. And so here is in the next scenario. As soon as we see, I don't think, then that's obviously an isolated situation. And yet it is intentional, right? It is that we have intentionally discriminated against this person. Okay, think you get the point. There's some obvious signs that an organization has problems here. And there's a point I wanted to make here. Oh, no, this is it. Yeah, this is where it's discussing for a moment, because I guess when we have experienced systematic discrimination, that one of the things that we might consider is affirmative action, where we really, I guess another word we can use for it is reverse discrimination. And in the West, anyway, there has been all kinds of affirmative action, particularly in this job, is that academic faculty from universities has historically been male-dominant. And so now, if you read any recruiting advertisement, it will say at the bottom that we are particularly interested in candidates, either female or from minorities or disabilities who have been affected in the past. So I guess this ends up being discrimination against, well, me as a white male. So is this right or is this wrong? Is affirmative action something that we should be using in our organizations to try and right what society in general has seen as an injustice? It isn't right?
No, it's not right.
Right. Why not?
Because it's still considered as an intentional discrimination.
So you can't use discrimination to fix discrimination? Is that what you're saying?
Against male, against white male, because they're white,
Right.
male.
Right.
Maybe it's justifiable if you're trying to achieve a balance for a need in the organization.
Right. Well, that's...
But they wouldn't make it obvious.
Like sometimes, I suppose, yeah, in hiring, I think as an organization, what you want to be able to do is hire the most capable person, regardless of their background, their gender, their race, where they came from, right? Is that we serve our stakeholders by hiring the most talented people we can find.
So it would come down to the skills of this person. If there's a position that only women or a man can fill, so you need to target that.
Right. Well, I don't know if
But
there
if
are.
there is no justification.
I don't think there are too many of those left.
Well,
Right.
yeah.
So, yeah, that's. I think sometimes we have the opportunity to change this, like where we have a new prime minister in Canada. He was able, because effectively the old government was thrown out of power, he can start over at point zero, and he did. He has a cabinet of, I think, 34 members, and there's 17 women and 17 men. So is that fair? Is that, I think the number was, there was 60-some percent of all the candidates that were elected in his party were men, and 30-some percent were women, but they were equally represented, 50% and 50% in capitalism. So is that fair? Is that justified?
Their gender shouldn't be relevant. It should, their contribution and skills should be important.
So we can't use affirmative action even if we think that we've discriminated against this group in the past. We can't try and shift the table and now discriminate in order to try and solve those
You're
past.
not adding value, no. There is no added
Because
value.
this will affect
no.
the other part.
Right.
It will still affect the other.
Well, yeah, that's,
It's just won't fix the problem. It's gonna create a lot of conflict at the same time.
so I guess, where this comes up in business is that if you look at boards of directors, is that in the workforce, it's basically equal, 50% men, 50% women. If you look at boards of directors, the governance of corporations, yeah, it's highly skewed towards men, right? Because less than 30% of boards of directors are women. So,
Even the board.
right. So, as a woman, shouldn't you be arguing that this is something that you deserve more representation in?
I would call for equal with them.
Right.
Definitely. Because we have skills as much as men have skills.
Yeah, there's nothing to suggest that women can't manage
Absolutely.
organizations as well as men. So,
Exactly.
to say that, yeah,
There are a lot of successful women out there.
yeah, well, that's in the workforce, they're equal. So the pool of talent is the same. So, yeah, if it comes to boards of directors and there's an imbalance there, then it's been a systematic discrimination against one group over the other. And that's what we're trying to
Unless it
avoid.
happens unintentionally. Unless it wasn't even something that they thought of. Sometimes it happens.
Well, that's,
you know.
yeah, that's
They
hard
hire
to.
people based on their talents and experience, but they don't think whether it should be a woman or a man.
Right,
So it happens sporadically,
right.
if you know what I mean.
Well, there has been and
Cases of
it would have to be intentional, right?
If, yeah,
boards are electing more men to represent shareholders than women, then that would be systematic and intentional.
absolutely.
So, well, there are a number of initiatives to try and correct this imbalance, but it's difficult to do, sort of overnight. Is that
It
without,
takes time.
completely disrupting the system, it's going to take a while. But, yeah, I think it's
But
hard
it's a good way
to,
to represent the company and themselves as well.
yeah, it's hard to argue against these sorts of actions because we've seen all kinds of examples of discrimination in all kinds of settings. So if we don't, use some form of discrimination, right, is that we're not going to be able to correct those imbalances. So myself, I would argue for this as a remedy. So, I think this was the only real point I wanted to make in this particular slide. Show here, you see we're coming up to 1 o'clock. So, this is sort of the point I wanted to make here about diversity, is that especially in global organizations, is that there is a reason to practice diversity, is that it brings different perspectives from different regions of the world and specific knowledge about foreign markets that we may wish to enter. So diversity shouldn't be, just something we're trying to correct. This is something as organizations and as managers that we should be embracing in order to develop our competitive advantage as an organization. And that it also, I think, has great benefit potentially to society, is that diverse organizations also promote an atmosphere of tolerance and understanding. So that's it for 5. So 6, 7, we've only got a couple of.
Yeah.
All right, a little hard to bring them along if you don't have them. The rest is pretty straightforward. Bring a, I hope you don't have to do too many calculations for this exam, but always handy to have a dictionary with you. So the first part is that in a couple of weeks here, you will be getting a case study that you will do and submit before the exam, or I guess you can bring it in hard copy if you want to the exam, but probably best, to send by email. You'll have a record of it, and if there's any issues, just have you resend them or whatever. So there's part 1. Okay, so it looks like here that you do have to do both. Submit the case study in a Word document first, and then bring a hard copy on the date of the exam. Okay, so do both. Send it and bring the hard copy. So this is the first 40%, and I will, in my follow-up email, I will give you some, I don't think I have specific questions about that. So I will provide you with some direction for case 1. So if you don't hear from me next week, that means that I'm missing your email. So if you don't hear from me by the end of next week, make sure you contact me to get this follow-up email. So 2 parts then to the sit-down. So the first part is going to be another case study. And then the second part is going to be 4 questions, of which you answer 2. And so one piece of direction I'd like to give you about these questions that I noticed in the last course that I gave a week ago is that these questions were highly complex. That there would be one sentence, and they might highlight 1 or 2 things, but there was actually 5 parts to this question. So in preparing and actually writing this exam, what I would suggest as a strategy is read all 4 questions, decide which 2 you're most comfortable and prepared to answer, and then go back and read them super carefully and dissect them, right? It'll come in a sentence, and the sentence might only be 2 lines long. But what I saw in the questions in the last exam for the negotiation strategy course is that there was actually 5 parts, in those 2 lines. So I would take and list out every part of that question. And this I've recommended through my whole career. It always benefited me. I did an English minor as an undergraduate, and did quite a bit of writing, and always benefited from doing an outline first. Now, we have lots of time in this exam, and I guarantee your results will improve if you take the time, outline the question first, and then write it up from there. And again, I don't think, but I'll clarify this as well, but I don't think they require complete sentences, right? You can do this in point form. Is that, as you saw on most of the slides, it's in point form. So they're looking for specific words. And if you cover them, then you'll get full credit. I can't stress enough how your results will improve if you take the time to outline the question first. Dissect it from the written question into its component parts, put down the pieces underneath of it, and then just add them into brief points in the answer. All right. So I guess I don't think we have, well, we do here. One question on case study. So I guess that is the case study that you'll get in the exam. The one you get before, I guess we will be expecting on the, so 4 questions for the written part, 1 question on the case study. So we should be able to see about 5 different topics here. So the first one is business ethics, the importance and reasons with examples. So that would relate to those first sort of 5 positions that we have. So those 5, I think we'll see probably more than one. It looks like we're going to have a question where you need to argue that business ethics are unnecessary. So that was, we didn't spend really much time on that, which maybe we should have, but I'll try and send you some direction there to specifically those sides. Because there was a whole section there that did talk about the reasons people come up with that to justify unethical behavior. So we should have maybe spent a little more time on that, but I will send you along some direction of the specific section on that.
Or we can take it off from the important.
Sorry?
Or we can take it off from the important topics if we didn't go through it that one.
Right, right. Yeah, those, I mean, they're all in the slides there, but I guess I should have spent a little more time going over those, but I will in my follow-up give you some direction as to the specific area to answer that question. Forms of discrimination, intentional, institutional with examples. I think we did cover that that part pretty thoroughly. So there was just the 4 different scenarios there, and the examples are there right in the slides. So that should be a pretty straightforward one to answer. And then we did talk a bit about affirmative action in the last couple of chapters. It's asking you here to justify affirmative action in terms of compensation and achieving social goals. So there I think we talked about how we have some perceived social injustices from the past, and that, you know, they're difficult in a short period of time to change, right? And so that we might need to develop an affirmative action program in order to sort of expedite that, right? Is that if it is wrong, if it is unjust, you know, it shouldn't take generations really to fix, right? We should be able to do it a bit quicker. So, I think then we did talk about the duties of the employer, those 3 sort of obligations that they have to employees, and then the obligations of the employee and the 4 areas where they tend to have some potential conflicts. Well, that was one of the conflicts of interest down to insider trade. Those 4 areas: theft, conflict of interest, theft, and there was one more. So those 4 areas, it looks like you'll get a question directly related to that. Ethical approaches, then we saw in the, well, and I guess those are those first 5. Yeah. So from utilitarian to virtuous, those are ethical approaches. And then it looks like you'll be asked some different scenarios and what sort of approach is being used there. So I think those 5 approaches were straightforward. I guess one comment about them is that they do conflict, right? Some of them, they don't all sort of fit continuously together. There are some conflicts between them. And so in answering a question like that, I think that that's something that you'd want to be aware of. All right. And then in the last chapter, we have the slides on values. And why don't we just quickly, because this is the end of this presentation, so why don't we just quickly review the part for this last one, this importance of values. Pretty sure that that was here, and yeah, these last sort of 5 slides. And so it talks about, early in our careers, we need to understand the reasons that underlie moral principles. And I guess the reason there is if we know them, we're more likely to comply with them, and how they apply to our organization. The second one is that it'll help us in resolving issues and dilemmas as they arise. That one's pretty straightforward. Responsible tone for the organization. This seems like a bit of a repetition of the previous 3, but yeah, you'll have these. So this, again, I'll check and make sure that this is the specific responses that they're looking for. That last question on the importance of values. This says relevance of values, but I think they're using it in the same way. Okay, so those 5 slides for that last particular one. And the ethical approaches, yeah, that was all in the first chapter. And I'll send you these slides. I've added to, maybe I'll send you both sets, because I'll send you the stock set, and then I'll send you mine. And as I mentioned at the outset, if there's any contradiction between what I've said and what the stocks set of slides say, make sure you go with them. So forget what I said. All right. So ethical approaches, I think we're all straightforward there. The duties of the employer, obligations of the employee, I think we went through that in some detail, so you know where you can find that. The affirmative action, we went through that, so you'll be able to find it. And then forms of discrimination, and this 2x2 matrix, I think we went through. The importance, this sort of overlaps with that last question, but I think this one we'll find in that first chapter as well. Maybe we should just spend a couple of minutes having a look for the responses for this second question here as to why business ethics are unnecessary. So I think we kind of glazed over that section. So let's have a quick look. quick look there. So these were the reasons against. Counter arguments. Okay. So objections to practicing business ethics. So we should find this right here in this second section. So arguments against. So the first one here is that in perfectly competitive markets, pursuit of profits will ensure members of society are served in the most socially beneficial way, which they argue is synonymous with most efficient. I would agree with the most efficient part of it, but not necessarily in the socially beneficial way. And so yeah, this came from Adam Smith and his sort of economics view of the world, that markets have this invisible hand, which is really supply and demand factors. As prices tend to rise, more competitors come to the market seeing additional opportunities, and so supply and demand naturally balances itself out. So the counter argument here is that we don't find too many examples of perfect competition, and that there are issues in our organization beyond pure profit motives. So I think there's only three here. So the second one, that somehow business managers intrinsically know what is in the best interest of the organization. The counter arguments there that, yeah, typically they do understand the market and the financial implications of their actions, but that this is a bit of a short-term view, that if we're building the brand of the organization, that message should be encased in trust, and the way we build trust is through our ethical conduct, not only with our customers, but with all of our stakeholders, our suppliers, with governments, with shareholders, and the rest. So the last one here then is that ethical behavior should really be prescripted by law. Well, I think we have argued along the way here that that's kind of the final stage, right? Is that we can reach our kind of moral ground and all kind of ethical ground that's been prescribed by society before we even get to the law. So this is a very low bar to set for the behavior of the organization. So ethics, what the society believes in terms of the way we should act, goes way beyond what is legal. And again, the whole purpose here is to develop trust from our customers and our whole stakeholder group. And the way that one of the biggest ways we can do that is through ethical treatment in all aspects of our business. Okay, so I think we've covered these. And so the only thing, I think these should cover, because we really only have, although they could be, they could combine more than one of these. Because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, for one case and 4 questions. But more than one of these could be combined. So, if this doesn't cover any aspect of the case that you'll have to prepare before the exam, the case in the exam, or the other 4 questions, I will follow up with an email to you, cover that gap. If you don't get that between now and the end of next week, it will mean that your email is not on my list, so you'll need to contact me directly.
What about the cases study?
What about it?
Can you give us a hint?
Well, I suspect, as I just said, that that case study will cover one of those 7 topics in this list. And if it doesn't, I'll add it to my email.
And the one you need to deliver, what is the exam?
Yeah, it's the same for both. If the questions for either the case you have to hand in before or the one you have to do in the exam is not covered in this list of 7 points, I will follow up with you by email to cover that again. Okay, fair enough? Because I think we've had some issues in the past where we've seen some surprises on the exam, and we don't want that. We don't. Sometimes surprises are good. Exams and not to be an example of that. So I want to make everything as clear and straightforward as I possibly can. So hopefully today we have covered these topics. As I said, if there's any gaps, I will follow up with you. So is there any other questions that I can answer for you at this point? Not imperative that you come up with them now. You can always email me along the way, and I will do my best to respond to you in a complete and timely manner. So I guess I have a number of responsibilities in this program, and for me, customer satisfaction kind of rates right at the top. Is that I think that's how we grow and expand this program, and how we really define success. That's what defines success for me in my job is your satisfaction with the program from both sides, right? From the education side, that you're getting the content that you were looking for, and then from the administration side, right? Is that you're all busy working professionals, and so you don't need any more headaches, right? Especially when it comes to this program, right? We're here to provide you with with solutions for your life, not more liabilities. So I appreciate all of you coming today. I really appreciate your participation in the process. It makes my job a lot easier. And I really appreciate your candor when you have issues. The only way I can solve them and make the program better so that we all succeed is if you give me very specific, detailed, honest feedback, right? Is that, and I don't want you to apologize for that, right? That's my job. It's all of our job at ATMS is here to make sure that things are going smoothly and we're delivering the content that's going to help you do your job better, right? And if we're not measuring up to that, then we need to know and we need to fix those things. So, I guess I hope I've said enough for today. It certainly feels like I have talked more in these sessions than I do in a couple of weeks. So if you don't have any questions for me now, that'd be great because I'm kind of tired of talking.
I have a question.
Okay,
When should we expect the case study to be sent to us?
third week.
Oh,
So-
wow.
So,
So we have 1 week to work on it?
well, the exam's week 5, so you should have 2 weeks.
No, it's actually 4 weeks.
Sorry?
It's actually 4 weeks. Huh?
4 weeks, I guess. Yeah, 4 weeks.
No, it's usually a month from now.
Right.
It's 4 weeks, no time.
Right. Well, let me make note, I'll try and get this, there's no reason that we can't send it right away. So,
Yeah, because we need to prepare the case study that we don't
So,
develop it.
I'll try and get this case to you as soon as we can. And if there's some reason that we can't, I will try and explain what that is, but I certainly can't see that at this point, so. Okay, anything else?
Thank you. Thank you
Okay,
so
yeah,
much.
well,
Thank you.
thanks for coming.